Hi there, welcome back. This is JavaScript Fundamentals course number 2, and in this lecture, I will speak about functions, arrays, objects, and the for loop, the very most important ingredients of writing good code. I am really excited. Let me share my screen and let's begin. And this is from the JavaScript Fundamentals Lecture 1. Let me select everything and comment out. We can definitely use the same file. Fundamentals 2. And we said we will speak about first functions. Now, I have a question to you. Let's assume my birth year is 2002. And you are watching this video in 2025. And if I ask you what was my age, what number would you come up? Most of you didn't even thinking about it. You will say you're about 23 years old. Well, I identify myself as 23 years old, let's assume, okay? And that's the truth. How, if you think about it, how did you come up with that number? Your brain gives some instructions, right? Like you heard my birth year and then identify the year we are in and subtract the 2 and return the 23. Just like that, for doing some jobs on the computer, we need to give it instructions as a programmer. And these instructions are transformed through a function, okay? Just like the variables were the space we are creating in the memory to hold some data, you can consider the functions the way of storing your instructions for solving a problem. In that example, it was just the age problem we were solving. And if you think it that way, then you will escape from the difficulties of writing, most of the difficulties of writing a function, because my experience is most of the time the students are having a hard time to write a function because they assume the computer knows everything. No, computer knows as much as you tell her, okay? So you are going to write an instruction, a recipe to solve a specific problem inside of the function syntax. And in the beginning, I suggest you actually forget about the language you are learning the function to write from. Just write in your own language a solution, a recipe to a problem, and then try to convert it to the programming language. Okay, that's being said. Now let's see how we can write. What is this? What is the syntax for writing a function in JavaScript? Well, there are 3 ways of writing functions at the moment in JavaScript. I will start with the most familiar structure, which is, again, just like remember from the JavaScript Fundamentals Lecture 1, we had the if, and if we are writing a decision making, there we had the if-else statement, so we had the if keyword. Here we have the function keyword. So function keyword, and now we need to give a name to that function. And we speak about calculation of age. So I will create a calc age function. And this calc age function is going to have a regular parentheses, just like remember the if, regular parentheses, and then the curly parentheses. And there I told you the curly parentheses used in JavaScript to store your code. So your code goes here. Okay. Now, in this stage, we are still declaring the function. So this is the function declaration stage. This is the stage that you are creating the recipe. There is no real data yet. There is no real action is taken yet. We will see in a minute how we can load this function with the real data and execute it. But now let's go for the age calculation to write a function and how we do that. Now, well, step number 1 is going to be, right, if we just write it as I told you, as some recipe steps and forget about JavaScript at that point. The code here is supposed to do that. 1, get the, if we will calculate the age of someone, get the birth year of someone, number 1, and number 2, subtract from the current year, the birth year. So this is the recipe for the solution of calculating somebody's age. Now we have to focus how get the birth year of someone. Well, for a function, if it needs some data from the outside. In this case, the data we need from the outside is the birth year of the person. And we don't know in advance the birth year of the person, right? Whoever is going to use that function to solve their age problem is going to supply the function. That's what we are expecting with the real data. So at that level, we are going to assume and we are going to give a placeholder for that data will come from the outside, and let's call it birth year for the sake of understanding. Okay, so and this data is given between the parentheses, the regular parentheses. We will say here the birth year. This is our placeholder for the future real data. Okay, now we will assume the birth year is the real data and behave inside of the function as if it is the real data. Step number 2, so that's how we get the birth year of someone. And step number 2, subtract from the current year the birth year. I can hard code the current year, and that's be 2025. And because I don't know the birth year, and I will assume, I told you, I will assume that it's going to be the real year. So I write here birth year like that. Okay, so that's it. We just created a JavaScript function, a function definition. But right now I see nothing in the console because I haven't executed that function yet. Execution means applying a real data to this function and seeing the results, okay? To do so, we need to call the function by name, calc age, we will say. And now I'm going to give it a real data like that. I still see nothing. Let's just grab it inside of the console.log, because if we want to see the things in the console, we need to grab everything inside of the console.log function like that. Oh, we don't see what we think we would see, but instead we are seeing undefined. Why is that? JavaScript function doesn't give the result automatically. We need to use another keyword in order to say to JavaScript execution environment, hey, this function is done. She did what it's supposed to do. Just finish everything and return whatever the function needs to return. A function doesn't have to return always something, but in this case, it does. It has to return us the birth year. So I will use a return keyword before that, okay? Now it's 35. Voila, we are seeing the number, okay? With this example, you have the most basic ingredients of writing a function in JavaScript. We have the function keyword, name of the function, and this is the function definition we said. Then any data that the function is supposed to accept from the outside is called parameter. And parameter is basically the placeholder of the data. And then if the function needs to return something, we have the return keyword. While we are executing the function, we are feeding the function with the data she will need. Here we have to give the birth year. And we call in the function definition, the data as a parameter, but we are feeding the data. It is called argument, okay? That's the difference between the parameter and argument. Parameter is while we are describing the function, the data placeholder we are giving, it's called parameter. And when we are feeding the data, it's called argument. Now let's do more examples. What about writing another function? And let's write a function is even. And please also pay attention naming of the functions. I again start with the lowercase and then if there's any other words coming up, I start with the uppercase. This is again called camel casing. Is even is a function that will check if a number is even or not. If it is even, it will basically return true. If it is not, it's going to return false. Again, we need data right here because we need a number to check if it is even or not. So the first thing first, I need to feed this function with a parameter, and just because it's a common thing to do, give data names, whatever, some closed data names. And in this case, because it's going to be a placeholder for a number, I will call this num. Okay, and now I want to decide if it is even or not. So remember from the JavaScript Fundamentals 1, I spoke about the modules operator. What was the modules operator was doing? It was dividing, it was bringing the reminder of a division, right? So what is the definition of a even number? It is any number that can be divided with 2 with no reminder. I can write, what about if I do something like that? So num modulus 2 is equal to 0. Basically, because this is a comparison, it's going to return a Boolean. If this number can be divided by 2, this equality is going to return true. If not, it's going to return false. All I have to do to put the return statement here to let the JavaScript know that I'm going to return whatever this equality is going to come up with. And I'm done here. I don't need to execute any other code. Now, that was the definition of the function. If we just go and console.log and feed the function with the real data and see what's going on. Well, the 10 is a new even number. It's true. If we go and just write here 19, it's supposed to return false. So the function works fine, seems like. Let's do another example. Let's write a function that will return the sum of two numbers. Can you guess? You can stop the video here and try to do it yourself. Now, function sum of two numbers. Here, because we need two numbers, the number of parameters are two. So I have the num1 for as a placeholder for the first number and the num2 for the second number. And because all I have to do is to sum these two numbers, I just put the return statement to the beginning of the sum of the two numbers. And this is the definition of the function. And if I need to call that function, execute that function, all I have to do is to call it with the real data, pass it with the real data. And what will happen here, let's just also try to understand what's going on. In order to understand what's going on closely, let's try to think like this JavaScript execution environment. When the JavaScript execution environment sees that sum of two numbers with the real data, she is going to search, that she will know that this is a function. So she's going to search for that function definition. And then once she will find that the function definition, she's going to replace the num1 by 2 and num2 by 3. So that's how we are going to come up. And then she will discover the recipe for that function, which is just the summation. She will do that operation on the 2 and 3, come up with the 5 and return that number. That's how all those functions are executing. JavaScript finds the function and then passes the real data and replaces the parameter value with the real value. Okay. I hope functions were clear. Let's continue with the arrays, okay? Arrays. What are arrays? Arrays are built-in data structures. Arrays are built-in data structures in JavaScript. Okay. Data structures, structured data, why we need that? What does it mean? Aren't we already representing the data, holding the data inside of the variables? Why do we need structured data? Well as you understand completely while you are improving your JavaScript knowledge, just to give you a basic idea, let me explain that. Let's imagine we are going to send a bunch of emails, right? That we will need some bunch of emails in a code. And what you would do maybe if we didn't have a structured data, you would create a const and email1, a variable, email variable, and hold there the email1 at gmail.com. And then create another variable with the same way, basically. Each time when you create a variable like that, what is happening is JavaScript is just spreading them random places in the memory. So we have an email1 place and store the email1 at gmail.com there. And then we will have the email2, and this goes on and on. And in the future, when you will need an operation on this data, what you will need to do is just to call it one by one. And that from the random places in the memory, which is a lot of work. Instead, what you would prefer is if there was a possibility to take all the data and place one spot in the memory. That's what the arrays are doing. Like you can think it like a container for bunch of data, and this bunch of data can be in the shape of an array, can be in the shape of an array of arrays, or an array for the strings or numbers or the mixture. Now, these emails, instead of creating a lot of variables, we could just create an array and put them inside of the array. I will say array email. And the way of creating an email, we have the square brackets, and one of the ways of creating an array in JavaScript, creating that square brackets, and we just directly, not even without using the variables, we can just directly come here and put the emails in it, like so. And let me just comment out 1, 2, comment email at gmail.com. And then for the second one, just copy paste. That's it. And if we console.log the array now, array email, that's it. All the data in it, okay? And as I said, this is not all of it needs to be a string. One of them can be a string and the other one can be a number or another array. Okay, and that's not the only good thing of having a structured data. Arrays in JavaScript are class, so which means that they have their own methods we can apply and we can make some operations on them, which makes the life a lot more easier. We can basically go more than just seeing the array or using the data or putting them in one place in the memory. Before going into the array, the methods we can apply on the array to modify them or to do some operations on them, let's just think how we can see the data. Now, in array data structure, every data we are adding up inside of the array represented by an index number. If I open this in the console, you will see that index number here too. And the number starts from 0 and 1. The second one is the index number 1. And if I want to see one of the data, a specific data, what I need to do is just place the brackets inside of the next to the name of the array and pass the index number. So array email square bracket 0 is going to give me the first one. And if, of course, I pass the index number 1, I will get the number 1, which is the second data here. Okay, that's how we can see the specific data by using the index number belong to that data. Now let's go into see about the basic array methods, what I mean. So what are the methods? Maybe you are into coding, you are quite new, or you are there for a while and you keep hearing the method and function and thinking, what is the difference? Well, a function is an independent recipe, just like here. As you see, calc age is called with nothing in front of it, not on something. It was just a recipe and we called it and it was executed. It didn't change anything specifically. So that is a function, okay? A method, on the other hand, is a function we can apply on an object, which means when we apply a specific function on the object, the method of that object must modify the object. Here, and how can I call a method on the object? Well, arrays are objects in JavaScript. You will know why if we keep learning together the object-oriented programming in JavaScript as well. Now, array email here, when I created an array, actually I create an object. And because that is an object, I can use the dot notation to apply a method belong to that object. And in array, one of the most simplest method you can apply, you will hear all the time, is the push. Push is used to add something, a new data inside of the array. And that data is going to be added to the end of the array. Because arrays has index numbers, there is a beginning and end to the array. Like the end is, you can imagine it is that side and the beginning is the left side, right? So the push, what the push is going to do is it's going to add a new data to the array and it's going to add it to the end of the array. Let's just add here a word, hello. Now, if I console.log array email now, I will see the third data is add to the end. How did this happen? This happened through the push method. Push method manipulate the array email, which is an object. And that's why I'm calling it as a method. Actually, it's a function, but because it is belong to the array family, array class, and right now I am applying it to the array object, that's why we call them as a method. So push is one of those methods, most basic array methods. It's better if you learn by heart. And that is for adding a data to the end of the array. If we want to just move data from the end of the array, what we can do is we can get the array email and apply pop. And pop is a method. She doesn't take any arguments. Like here, the push had to take an argument because you are adding a data. But the pop is basically automatically removes the last element from the array. So she knows who is the last element, probably in the definition. If you go and read the definition of the pop method from somewhere, you will see. And now when I console.log the array email, I don't see the hello anymore. Pop is removed it. And this push and pop method is used for adding or removing data from the end of the array. We can do the same to the beginning. Now, let's add new data to the beginning of the array. That is the unshift method. Unshift method exactly knows how to go to the beginning of the array and adds the high to the beginning. You can see it in the console. And if you want to remove the first element from the beginning of the array, we are using the shift method. Okay. Actually, on the way, I forgot to tell you the most basic property belong to the arrays. Now we know the push, pop, unshift, and shift, what they're doing. Let's just go back to array email and do that, dot length. I can do this inside of the console.log. Actually, let me just scroll up a little bit so you can see it. Array email dot length. What the length property does is it is returning the number of elements inside of the array. Right now I have 2 elements inside of the array, so I see 2. Okay, the length property is used a lot, specifically when we are learning the for loop. You will see what I mean. Those are the most basic elements of the arrays. Of course, there are a lot more array methods you need to learn, but slowly we will learn them. When we are solving problems, we will solve more problems. It's not all theory. I recommend you first learn the most fundamental, most important things about a subject and try to apply it. After you're sure that you are good with applying that, just take it one step further, one step further. And now let's speak about the objects, okay? Objects. What are objects? Well, objects are just like array. Objects are just like arrays. They are data structures. They are data structures. Okay. We already have a built-in data structures, and those are arrays, and they are great. Why do we need another one? That's confusing. Now, let's imagine you're a programmer and you are hired by a university to write a code to display the data about every student. You need a user interface for that, and you need the data about the student. We will come to the part, the user interface, how to build a user interface part later. But for now, let's focus on the data. I think you all agree by now that every student's data needs to be together. We don't want them to spread all over the memory. And we don't know the objects yet, so we have only the array as an option. Maybe we might be thinking of storing every data of a student. Open an array student1, and student1 is going to be John, 23 years old, and the subjects he's taking, maybe the math, the lessons he's taking, math, programming, and maybe he's from Chicago, and he is also likes to learn, or he's just maybe the first year, so you need another number here to represent that one, etc., etc. Can you already see how complicated it is? Like we won't have just one student, and there will be many other students, and at some point you won't know which data is belong to what data. What is it initiate? What is Chicago? Is it, where is he from, or whatever, and what is one is representing, right? It's very, very confusing. Instead, I can create an object. And if I create an object just like that, student1, now when we are creating object, the naming is the same. Instead of square brackets, we are using the curly parentheses, okay? And now I can do this. ID, which year? Okay, why we are creating, and because we name them the same, let's comment this out. Now the things are more clear. And again, I store the data. That's how objects are storing the data. A little bit different from the array. Arrays are great, and you will use it a lot. Actually, you will create, the data will come in the JSON format from an API, or you are going to create your own data, store your own data as an array of objects and send it as a JSON object somewhere. You will see how the things are going to connect to each other in the future. But for now, we can see the difference between an array and object. Objects has that doesn't have an index number. Instead, we have the key value pairs. So the keys are strings, and those are the keys, and they can only be a string in JavaScript. And the column, and then after that we have the value. As you see, we can store an array, or we can store a number, we can store string, we can even store a function inside of an object. And what if we want to read one data from the object? Well, it is simple. Let's create a console.log. Since we don't have the index number, but we have the property key, so we are having the name of the objects and then the dot notation and just continue with the key. So student1.name, and that's John. Okay. And of course, the objects has its own details, has own methods we can apply and a lot of things, but in the most simplistic way, that is what is an object, and that's how you can select and data from an object. And if you want to add another property key values in an object, we just need to come here, take the name student1 dot and what we want to add, maybe we want to add we have the age in some year, like we can just say year, and 2025. So if we console.log the student1, year is a part of the object now. Okay, that's all for the objects. Now let's continue with for loop. Okay, what's the for loop? In programming, we need a way of telling to the computer again to execute a code some number of times, a certain number of times. Okay, what I mean by that, for example, we want to count, right, from 1 to 3. If we didn't have for loop and all we have to printing the console, what we need to do is console.log 1. So that will print 1, and then console.log 2, we keep counting console.log 3. Instead of doing that, copy paste the same code over and over again to do something, wouldn't be better if we had a way of telling the computer, hey, take this line of a code here that is the console.log and execute it 3 times. That's why we are using the for loop, okay? To take a code, take a piece of code and execute it for a certain number of times. And now we know what the for loop does. Let's see what is the syntax in JavaScript language. We have the for keyword, again, the parentheses, and the curly parentheses. As you already know, the curly parentheses is for the code goes here. That code is the code that will be executed some number of times. Okay, since we are counting here, I will use the name of the variable as count, but you might be recognizing the for with I, that is what is used most of the time. So don't get confused here. Inside of the for parentheses, we need to define 3 stations. First, we need to declare the variable we want to use. And we do this with the let keyword. You will understand in a second why. And I name the variable as count. And because I start from 1, I assign it to the 1. Semicolon, I'm done here. Now, I need to create, in the second station, I need to create a kind of a Boolean, a comparison, a Boolean that will decide if the loop is going to continue or not. For now, I do this count is smaller than or equal to 3. And as you see, that is a comparison and gonna produce a Boolean, and how this Boolean is going to be used to make a decision in the for loop, I will explain. So we are done in that station as well. Now we need to put on the count this side, and here, because we start from counting from 1 and stop at 3, I will just write here count plus plus, which is a shortcut for count is equal to count plus 1. Instead, we can say plus plus, which is increment the count by 1. And now we define 3 things we have to inside of the parentheses. And in the curly parentheses, the code we are going to write is going to be console.log. And this console.log is going to print, as all you can imagine, is the count. Now, let's see in the console what will happen. Before I want to, yes, I want to do this. Now let's clean here. And I just need to restart the index.html. Okay, let's go to the console, inspect. Okay, that is now, because I already commented out the console.log 1, 2, 3, you can see that it's coming from the for loop 122. Okay, how the for loop is doing that? Well, the 3 station we define is working like this. When JavaScript execution environment sees the for, it searches for the variable and its value. The variable here is the count, and it's equal to 1. Then she checks the condition, and this is your condition part. Is it smaller? What is the condition? The count must be smaller than or equal to 3. Is it smaller than 3? Yes, it is. Then we are allowed to execute the code inside of the parentheses. So we will execute console.log, and the count at that point, it is 1. So that's how you see the 1. Is there any more code left inside of the code block? No. So the JavaScript execution environment will check for a possibility for another execution. Before doing that, she will apply the condition on the count. In this case, increment the count before making a decision on the execution of the code next time. We will increment the count by 1. It was 1, now it's going to be 2. Then we will check if the count is still smaller than or equal to 3. It is. So we can still execute the code inside of the code block. Then the count is going to be 2. There is no more code. I shall apply before checking the possibility if I can keep going. The count, again, increment it by 1. Now the count is going to be 3. The 3 is equal to 3. It is still returning true. The condition is still returning true here. So I can, again, execute the code, the count, and it is 3, 1, 2, 3. And before checking again the another possibility, the count will be incremented by 1. Now the count is going to be 4. But the 4 is not returning true here. It's returning false. That's how we stop the for loop. In the basic sense, that is what is a for loop and how it works behind the scenes. Most of the time in the functions, if you wrote before, if you solve any solutions to any algorithmic challenges before, you see that the for loop is applied on the array to get the data from the array. How we can apply that mentality on an array then? Well, when we declare a variable, because the arrays are visualized by the index number, we can count for loop on an index number. How the for loop can be applied on an array. Let me show you an example. I create just an array for the demonstration, and just to make the things more obvious, I'm not going to make it a numbers array, but maybe some names array, okay? So I have 3 names, John, Jane, Joe. By using the for loop, I want to display, just display for now, to print the data to the console. How to do that? How to write a for loop to display this, like that. Now let me explain you. Well, I think because you can see that the value of the I also going to change, just like the count is changed here. That's why we are using the let keyword, not the const keyword. But here, because we are going to visualize the data inside of the array, I am starting the number from the 0, not 1. Depending on what you are doing, depending on the algorithm you are going to create, you can decide where you are going to start with that variable. It's not supposed to 0, it's not supposed to be 1. It depends on what you are doing. Here, I'm just going to visualize the array, so I start from 0. And most of the time, you will see the I keyword. I don't know why. That's how it is. Then semicolon. And now here the condition, when the I is smaller than array.length. Remember, the length keyword was returning the number of elements in an array. In this case, array.length is going to return 3. And the condition on the I is when I is smaller than 3. That way, we are being sure that the I cannot be bigger than 2. Why is that? Well, the reason is quite simple. I'm sure most of you can see this. Because John is in the index number 0, and the Jane is index number 1, and the Joe is index number 2. Since we don't have index number 3 on the array, we don't want to get an error for exiting the size of the array. That's why we shall not put here an equality, okay? And then, of course, we are just visualizing the data. We are, again, the condition on the I is going to be plus plus, increment the I only by 1. And we are only printing the data yet. Here in the console.log, we have the array square brackets I, which I is representing the index number, which makes sense because remember in our array example, to visualize the data, we used, if we go back, like if we want to visualize the first element, we said that we are going to use the square brackets and pass the index number like so. Here, we are not passing the index number by heart, but we just place the I variable. So the for loop doing the job in every iteration step is going to place one of the index number that is proper for this array. Let me comment out that so we can see the names in the array. I hope for loop also was clear. Again, as I said, the most fundamental way. I hope you understand what it means and how to apply it to an array. If you will have any question, please comment right in the comment below. I come back as soon as I can. And that is the end of the video. Hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.